Hey guys, my name is Rob, and today we're unboxing the Gale Hall controller by Mojhon, or formerly BigBig Won. This is a wireless controller compatible with PC, Switch, and mobile, and I originally did have some interest in the Gale controller when it first came out, but was much more tempted by the updated version, which, as the name suggests, is updated to include Hall effect sticks. Now that I've finally talked myself into picking one up, let's open it up and check it out. I'm partially excited about this controller because of how much I've grown to love the Blitz 2. Obviously, this controller is very different, but I'm a fan of BigBig Won, or Mojhon. We have a number of items in the box here. The controller is front and center, but we're going to set it aside and save it for last. Below that, we have the charging dock, which has a USB-C port, and also a slot to plug in the dongle. Then we have the dongle itself, which has the company logo as well as a pairing button. I really love the way it plugs into the base. It sits flush with the top of the base, kind of like it's all one unit, and the pairing button is right on top for easy access, so that's pretty nice. Then we have a few items under this plastic insert. First, we have a USB-A to USB-C cable, and this is a short cable just meant for charging or for connecting the dock to the PC. Then we have a support card with a QR code that should take you to their website. Next, the instruction manual, which is a booklet style, so that's good. And lastly, we have an accessories bag, which contains 4 additional thumbstick caps. It looks like we have 2 medium rise and 2 tall rise sticks. Then finally, we have the gamepad, which has a pretty tame look compared to some of their other controllers, such as the Blitz and Rainbow lines. And also in terms of form factor, it's much more similar to an Xbox style controller. As far as features, we have membrane face buttons, and these feel okay. They're membranes, so they are kind of squishy, which I don't love, but also they're really loud. I wouldn't normally talk about button volume because I just don't care that much, but these are kind of exceptional in that way. They're honestly louder than mechanical switches, which is kind of weird. The D-pad, on the other hand, which is also membrane, is almost completely silent and feels good. I'll test this out in some Street Fighter later. As mentioned, the sticks are Hall effect, and the shafts have metal rings like we see on a lot of modern gamepads. They also have anti-friction rings, so they glide smoothly, but the metal contacting the anti-friction ring is also loud, just like those on the Blitz 2. That's not really a problem, just something you have to kind of get used to. The other front inputs are the home button, the menu, and view buttons, the screenshot button, and the function button. Then on top we have the shoulder buttons. These are tactile and feel good as far as input, but they are kind of high or tall, but they're easy to actuate anywhere on the button, so should be okay. Next we have analog triggers, and these are also Hall effect. They feel fine, they've got a little bit of texture grip, which I love, but unfortunately the biggest missing feature I'm concerned about with this controller is trigger stops. They're just a must for me at this point. I can't play FPS games without them. And it just occurred to me, I don't know of any Mojang controller that has trigger stops. We've recently reviewed the new Ether controller, which is a budget controller and doesn't offer that feature. Then we've got the Blitz and Rainbow lines, both of which we've seen with no analog triggers, just quick triggers. So I'm not sure Mojang has ever included trigger stops on a gamepad, which means I shouldn't have been surprised not to have them on the Gale, but somehow I had forgotten it didn't have stops until pretty much just now. On the back, we have 4 programmable buttons, and this is one of the features that I am excited about on the Gale. You can see that the rear button layout is similar to that of FlyDigi controllers such as the Vader 4 and Apex 4, and I personally really like this design. They also have some stippling and feel really good. We've also got a pairing button on the back, and just below that, the charging pins where the gamepad connects to the dock. Now we're going to go over customization and settings that you can adjust on the fly, and first is mode switching. By default, the controller is in X input mode, but with the gamepad turned on, you can hold the home and A button for 2 seconds to change to switch mode, and the home button light will turn red. You can swap back to X input mode by holding home and B for 2 seconds, and the indicator light will turn back to green. As far as I can tell, the Gale Hall only supports these 2 modes, so no D input mode. Next, we'll program the rear buttons, which you can do by holding the function button plus any one of the rear buttons. The function indicator light will illuminate. Then you press the button you want to map to that rear button, and the indicator light will flash to confirm. You can repeat this process to assign the other rear buttons, and if you want to clear a rear button, just hold that button down and double tap the function button, and the indicator light will flash to confirm mapping has been cleared. This only works to program the rear buttons, and you can only assign default controller inputs to those buttons, but we do get way more options in the app, and we'll get to that soon. Next, we have a turbo feature, which you can enable by holding the function button and then pressing an input, such as one of the triggers or face buttons. When turbo is enabled for an input, the function indicator will flash anytime you press that input. You can also hold function and press D-pad left to cycle through 3 turbo speeds, so essentially slow, medium, fast, and the indicator light will flash accordingly for the speed you have set. To disable turbo for an input, press and hold that input, and then double tap the function button. According to the manual, you can hold function and press left or right joystick to enable zero dead zone mode for that joystick. There's no vibration when I do this, and the function light doesn't flash or anything, so I'm a little skeptical that this actually works, but we'll test it in Gamepad Tester in just a bit and find out. You can also calibrate the joysticks and triggers by holding menu and view for 2 seconds. The home light will breathe white to indicate you're in calibration mode. As with many gamepads, rotate both sticks 3 to 4 times, then fully depress both triggers 3 to 4 times, and then press menu and view again to save calibration. The gyro can also be calibrated by placing the gamepad on a flat surface and pressing menu plus screenshot. The home light will breathe purple while calibrating, and then flash to indicate when calibration is complete. Holding function and pressing D-pad right will turn vibration on or off. There's no middle ground here, it's either on or off, so this shortcut just cycles between the two. When you're in X input mode on PC, you can adjust the PC volume by holding function and pressing up and down on the D-pad. And then lastly, I'm not going to do it right now because there's no need, but if you are having issues and need to reset the gamepad for any reason, you can do so by long pressing the home button for 10 full seconds. That covers all the settings you can adjust on the fly, but as I mentioned, you can do quite a bit more on the app, so we'll take a look at that now. This is the BigBig Won Assistant App, which is the same one used for the Blitz 2, and it essentially has all the same options. If I click the plus button to create a new profile, the first tab that comes up is Motion or Gyro, and by default it's on closed, which just means disabled, but you can choose to simulate either the left or right joystick. The next tab is for the sticks, and the left and right have separate sub-tabs. For each stick, you can adjust the dead zone, and you can also set up multiple response curves that you can swap between, but you do have to do that in the app. There's no option for cycling through different response curves directly on the gamepad. You can also enable or disable what they're calling dynamic calibration, but I honestly don't know exactly what that means, and as has always been the case with this app, clicking the info button does nothing useful. And then you can also reverse the X and Y axes independently. The next tab is for the triggers, and they're both on one page, but you can adjust the starting and ending dead zones for each independently. And then at the bottom of the page, you can also enable or disable hair trigger mode, again independently for each trigger. Next, we have keybinds, and this is the biggest benefit of the app. We can set up the rear or M buttons here, but in addition to gamepad inputs, we can also set keybinds. We also aren't limited to just the M buttons. We can remap every input on the controller except for the home and function buttons, and all of these inputs can be mapped to keybinds as well. So that's great to see, and it's one of the reasons I was actually interested in testing out the Gale controller. The last tab is for shake or rumble, and this page is pretty simple. We only have rumble in the grips on the Gale, so here you can adjust the strength of the left and right rumble motors. Once that's done, we can click save and we'll be prompted to name this configuration. Then back on the home page, we'll just need to click the radio dial here to select this as the active profile. Aside from the configuration page, we have the macros page, and here you can record macros to assign to any of the rear buttons. This isn't a feature that I'm likely to use, but I know some people want the option on a Pro controller, so there it is. The next page is what Mojhon refers to as the debug page, and here you can manually change the connection mode. You can run the joystick and trigger calibration, or the gyro calibration. You have an option to map the left stick to the D-pad, which also maps D-pad to left stick, so it just swaps the two. And then there's a link to the product manual, which doesn't seem to work for me. Then the last page is for upgrading firmware, which I'll go ahead and do. I'm going to skip through this part because it did take a few minutes. Then once it's complete, it will prompt you to reset the device and calibrate. Once you reconnect the controller, go into calibration, and this is exactly the same as doing it on the fly like we've already demonstrated. That's everything available in the app, but I did also just want to point out that once the gamepad was updated, I struggled to get it to reconnect to the wireless dongle. Eventually I figured out that the dongle also has to be updated, which you can do with the app, though the app doesn't prompt or explain how to do that, and it's not in the manual either. It's simple though, all you have to do is hold the pairing button on the dongle, and while holding it, plug it into the PC, and continue to hold it for a couple of seconds. Then the app will recognize the dongle is connected in an update mode, and will show the current firmware version as well as any available updates. That covers the app, so now we're going to look at some testing. We'll start with polling rate, and as usual, we're checking wired first. The Gale Hall was advertised as 1000 Hz wired, and that's what we're getting here, 983, with low jitter, so no concerns. And the marketing for the Gale Hall specifically said 1000 Hz wired and didn't specify wireless, so I expected it to be lower, but it came in at 904, so not too bad. I don't know if this was the case at launch or if it was adjusted in a firmware update or something, but just based on the marketing, I was expecting it to be 500 Hz or lower, so I'm a bit surprised. Next, we'll look at resolution, and this is using Gamepad LA's updated stick analyzer tool, which I think I like. Instead of program and analog points, it lists data points and resolution. So we're going to say 256 resolution since that's what it's telling us. But obviously, this can be affected by human error. It also gives a percentage for linearity, and I'm going to go ahead and assume this number is significantly impacted by human error, or my error in this case. But we'll see as we use the tool more on future gamepads. Regardless, right now, the Gale Hall is measuring at 87.8%. Lastly, we'll take a look at Gamepad Tester, and as you can see, the sticks aren't always bouncing back to a consistent resting point, but they are very close, and I have no stick drift in game, and this is with 0 dead zone. I also set up a different profile and set the dead zones at 5% to test the 0 dead zone shortcut setting that we talked about before, and it absolutely does work. So holding FN and pressing L3 or R3 will swap between 0 dead zone and whatever dead zone you have set on the currently equipped profile. As far as circularity, these modules are set up as circular algorithms, and there's no option to change this. The diagonals do extend just a bit beyond the maximum ranges of the up, down, left, right, so we get a 2.7% error rate, but the shading is very even, so these look perfectly fine. So conclusions. Long story short, I like this controller, but I'm definitely not in love with it. I played a good bit of Black Ops 6 with it in the last couple of weeks, and I like a lot of things about it, including the FlyDigi style rear buttons, and the keyboard mapping, and even the sticks, which feel good, but not nearly as good as the TMRs Mojhon put in the Blitz 2. It's an obvious comparison to make, so I kept pulling out the Blitz 2 while playing with the Gale Hall. Let me say first, it's not a clean sweep when comparing the two, mainly because of the shell design. I just prefer the Xbox style shape of the Gale compared to the kind of unique shape of the Blitz 2. It's more similar to a Switch Pro controller as far as the feel in hand, but not exactly that either. It's something you can get used to, but if I'm being honest with myself, I would love the Blitz 2 even more if it had a similar shape to the Gale Hall. And honestly, that's the biggest reason I wanted to test this controller out. It's also significantly cheaper than the Blitz 2, as you can currently pick up the Gale Hall on Amazon for under $50, whereas the Blitz 2 is going to run you $80. Unfortunately, the downsides are going to rule this controller out as a go-to for me. The biggest one is the lack of trigger stops or instant triggers. I'd be okay with either. I honestly don't even care about analog triggers, though obviously that's not the case for everyone. But I also don't love the feel of the face buttons. I'm not a big fan of the laser etched grips. I wish we had rubberized grips here. I'm also mildly annoyed by the stick caps. You'll notice I have a Control Freak on the right side, and it's a PlayStation version, but it's super loose. The only real reason this one worked for me is because it's a very low-rise Freak. Mediums or high-rise ones definitely wouldn't work. Unfortunately, the Xbox ones are too small and won't fit, so there's just not a perfect solution here. Of course, the Blitz 2 has the same issue. These caps are exactly the same other than color, and they are interchangeable. I actually mostly used this short dome cap that I got with my Blitz 2 on the left stick while testing the Gale. Just to wrap it up here, for under $50, the Gale Hall is a solid controller with a lot of good features, but there are some other good options on the market at that price point as well, so it depends on what you're looking for. GameSurge Cyclone 2 also offers an Xbox-style controller that honestly performs better, but it also only has 2 rear buttons versus the 4 on the Gale, so again, it really depends on what you're looking for. I hope this video helped you out, and if so, please subscribe if you haven't already. Likes are also appreciated, and I do try to react and respond to as many comments as possible. I'll be doing more reviews regularly, so I hope to see you back here again soon. Thanks for watching.